My grandma said you owe her a song, the black girl said. The billionaire slowly sat at the piano. The girl was 8 years old, standing dead center on the sidewalk in front of Tucker Corp., holding a folded piece of paper in both hands like it might break. Billy Tucker almost walked right past her. He walked past 100 people every morning without seeing a single face. But this girl didn't step aside. She looked straight up at him, calm, certain, and held out the paper. Mr. Tucker, my grandma said you owe her a song. Something old moved in his chest. Something he had not felt in 25 years. He didn't take the paper. He just stood there in his $4,000 suit while the whole city kept moving. And for the first time in decades, Billy Tucker had no words. She said you'd know the song. What debt can money never repay? Stay with us, this one will stay with you. Billy Tucker's mornings ran like clockwork. 5:45 the alarm. Not a phone alarm, an actual clock. Old with 2 brass bells on top, the kind his mother used to keep on the kitchen shelf back in Chicago. He had bought it at an antique shop on 5th Avenue 12 years ago and never told anyone why. His housekeeper thought it was decorative. His ex-wife thought it was ugly. Billy just wound it every Sunday night and set it on the nightstand and never explained. 6 black coffee, no sugar, standing at the floor-to-ceiling window of the penthouse. 47 floors up Midtown Manhattan, spread out below him like something he had won. Some mornings, that feeling still came, the quiet disbelief of a South Side kid who used to count coins for the bus. Most mornings now it was just a view. 6:30, the car. Raymond, his driver, always had the door open before Billy reached the curb. They didn't talk much. Raymond was good at reading silence, which was the main reason Billy had kept him for 9 years. 7, sharp the lobby of Tucker Corp. That was how it always went. Until the Tuesday in October when a little girl was standing on the sidewalk selling bookmarks. She had a folding table barely bigger than a TV tray set up against the stone wall beside the building entrance. On it were 24 bookmarks laid out in careful rows, each one handmade strips of thick cardstock painted in watercolor edged with thin ribbon tied in small bows. Blues and greens mostly, 1 or 2 in yellow, each one different. A handwritten sign in front read Emery's bookmarks, $2 each, all handmade. Billy didn't notice her at first. He was looking at his phone, scrolling through overnight emails from the Tokyo office when Raymond murmured, "Little entrepreneur out here again, sir. 3rd morning this week." Billy glanced up. She was small, even for 8. Wearing a puffy lavender coat that was a size too big, the sleeves folded back twice at the wrists. Her hair was in 2 puffs on either side of her head, one of them slightly looser than the other, like someone had done it in a hurry. She was straightening a bookmark that had shifted out of line, pressing it flat with 2 fingers, concentrating. She didn't look up when the car pulled in. Didn't flinch when the door opened. She just kept straightening her display precise and unhurried, like she had somewhere to be only after this was exactly right. Billy watched her for 3 seconds, maybe 4, then looked back at his phone. He had a board meeting at 8. A call with the Singapore office at 10. Lunch with a senator he didn't particularly like. He went through the glass doors and didn't think about her again, not until Wednesday. She was there again. Same table, same careful rows, different bookmarks, all new ones he noticed without meaning to. She was wearing the same coat. One of the ribbon bows had come undone on a bookmark near the edge of the table, and she was retying it with the focused patience of someone who had done it before and expected to have to do it again. A woman in a cream blazer stopped, looking at the display, bought 2. The girl said, "Thank you, ma'am," and counted out change from a small tin with a lid that had a painted flower on it. Billy went inside. Thursday, he had a breakfast meeting off-site and didn't come through the front entrance until nearly 9. The table was still there, but the girl was gone school, probably. The sign was still out. 3 bookmarks left. He told himself he noticed only because Raymond had mentioned her. Friday morning she was back. 7 sharp. Same lavender coat, same tin for change. She had a small thermos beside the sign now, something steaming inside, and she wrapped both hands around it between customers in the way people do when the cold is getting into their fingers. It was 41 degrees. Billy stopped. He was not a man who stopped. His whole life had been built on forward motion, don't look back. Don't slow down the next deal and the next floor and the next zero on the end of a number. Stopping was what other people did. But something about the way she stood there, unhurried, unbothered, completely self-possessed in a coat 2 sizes too big in 41-degree weather, made him stop. "How long have you been out here?" he asked. She looked up. No surprise, no nervousness. Just those steady dark eyes taking him in. "Since 6:15, she said. "I come before school. Every day, Monday through Friday." She paused. "I don't work weekends. I help my dad on weekends." Something in the way she said "I don't work weekends," so matter-of-fact, so adult, almost made him smile. Almost. "What are you saving up for?" he asked. "Shoes," she said. "For school. Mine have a hole in the left one." She said it the same way she might say the sky is gray today. No embarrassment. No plea for sympathy. Just a fact she had made peace with. Billy reached into his jacket pocket. He had a money clip, always did. He pulled 200s without thinking and held them out. She looked at the bills, then looked at him. "I'm not asking for donations," she said. "I'm selling bookmarks." He blinked. $2 each, she added helpfully. He stood there for a moment, 47 years old, $4.2 billion to his name, being gently corrected by an 8-year-old on the sidewalk. He put the hundreds back, looked at the table, picked up a bookmark blue watercolor green ribbon. "I'll take this one," he said. $2, please." He found 2 singles in his wallet. It took a moment, he rarely carried singles, and set them in the tin. She gave him the bookmark and said, "Thank you, sir," and turned back to straightening her display. He was almost at the door when she said, "Mr. Tucker." He turned. She was holding out a small folded piece of paper. Not a bookmark. Something else, cardstock folded into quarters, the edges worn slightly, as if it had been handled many times before she got here. "My grandma asked me to give you this," she said. "She said to give it to the man named Tucker who works in the tall building on 52nd. She said you'd know what it meant." Billy didn't move. "Your grandmother," he said slowly. "What's her name?" The girl held his gaze. "Rose," she said. "Her name was Rose. She passed away in July." The bookmark fell out of his hand. He didn't notice. The wind took it blue watercolor green ribbon tumbling off down the sidewalk. Billy Tucker stood at the entrance of his own building, 47 stories of glass and steel bearing his name above him, and felt the ground do something it had not done in 25 years. Shift. He reached out and took the folded paper from her small hand. It was lighter than he expected. He held it, but didn't open it. "What did she tell you about me?" he asked. His voice came out quieter than he intended. Emery thought about it for a moment, as if deciding how much to say. "She said you were a boy from her neighborhood," she said. "She said you were the most talented boy she ever knew." A small pause. "She said you'd know the song." She said you'd know the song. Billy Tucker stood on the sidewalk and said nothing. Behind him the revolving doors turned. People moved in and out. Raymond was at the curb watching. The city did what the city always does, kept moving indifferent loud. Billy was not moving. He was 22 years old again, standing in a doorway in Southside Chicago with a duffel bag and a one-way ticket, and an old woman's voice calling after him down the hall, "Billy, you promised me a song. I'll come back and play it for you, Miss Rose. When I make something of myself, I promise." He had made something of himself. He had never gone back. Billy did not ought to open the paper in the lobby. He carried it through the security turnstile into the elevator up 47 floors, past his assistant Carol, who said good morning and held out his schedule for the day. He took the schedule without reading it. He went into his office, closed the door, and stood at the window with the folded paper in his hand. Outside, Manhattan moved the way it always did. Indifferent, efficient. Beautiful in the way that things are beautiful when they don't need anything from you. He set the paper on his desk, sat down, picked it up again. It had been folded and unfolded before he could feel that in the soft creases the way the paper bent too easily along the lines like a map that had been opened too many times. Someone had held this many times before giving it away. He thought about Emery's hands, small and careful, carrying this through whatever mornings led her here. He thought about Rose's hands, the ones he remembered thick-knuckled, warm, always smelling faintly of the lavender soap she kept by her kitchen sink. He unfolded it. The handwriting was hers. He knew it before he finished reading the first line. Rose wrote the way she talked, unhurried, each letter deliberate, like she had all the time in the world and intended to use it properly. Billy, I don't know when Emery will find you, or if she will at all, but I told her look for the tall building on 52nd with the man's name on it. She's a good girl. She'll find you. I'm not writing to make you feel bad. You were young and you had places to go. I understood that then, and I understand it now. But I want you to know I never forgot what you promised. And I don't think you forgot either. I think you just got too busy being important to be the boy who made that promise. That boy was my favorite version of you, Billy. Play the song. Even if it's just for yourself. Even if I'm not there to hear it. Rose. P.S. My granddaughter Emery has your musical ear. I thought you should know. Billy read it twice, then a third time. He set it down on the desk and pressed 2 fingers against his mouth and looked at the ceiling. 25 years. He had built a company from nothing, had been on the cover of 3 magazines, had donated enough to hospitals and universities that buildings had his name on them. He had a penthouse with a Steinway piano he had bought 8 years ago because an interior designer said it would fill the space nicely, and he had never, not once, lifted the lid. He sat with that for a moment. Then he picked up his phone and called Marcus. Marcus Webb arrived at 11, which for Marcus was practically running. He was a tall man, silver at the temples, with the particular unhurried competence of someone who had seen enough crises to know which ones were actually emergencies. He had been Billy's lawyer for 16 years and his friend more or less for 22. He came in, looked at Billy's face, and sat down without being asked. Billy slid the letter across the desk. Marcus read it. He read it slowly, the way he read contracts, not looking for what was there, but for what was underneath. When he finished, he set it down and folded his hands. Rose, he said. Rose DeWitt, Billy said. She lived 2 doors down from my mother on Calumet Avenue. I was in her apartment more than my own when I was a kid. He paused. She had a piano, old upright black, the B-flat key stuck if you hit it too hard. She taught me on that piano. Marcus was quiet. She taught me for free, Billy continued. 3 years, every Tuesday and Thursday after school. My mother couldn't pay her. She said she didn't want paying. He looked at the letter. I wrote a piece. When I was 21, I told her I'd play it for her when I had something real to show, when I was somebody. And then you left. And then I left. Neither of them said anything for a moment. The girl, Marcus said. Emery. You believe she's who she says she is. I don't know what I believe yet, Billy said. That's why you're here. Marcus nodded once the nod that meant understood, I'll handle it. He had a way of receiving tasks without making them feel like tasks. Give me a few hours. He picked up the letter carefully, Billy noticed, not carelessly, and headed for the door. Billy stopped him. Marcus. He said it without looking up. She said something to me, the girl. She said her grandmother told her I'd know the song. Marcus stood in the doorway. Do you? He asked. Still know it? Billy didn't answer right away. He turned to the window. Down below 47 floors, a sliver of 52nd Street was visible between buildings. He couldn't see the sidewalk from here. Couldn't tell if Emery's small table was still there. I don't know, he said. I haven't thought about it in 25 years. Marcus left. Billy sat alone in his office for a long time and did not look at his schedule. He went down at noon. He told himself he was going out for air. He told Carol he'd be back in 20 minutes. He went through the lobby, through the revolving doors, and out onto 52nd Street. The table was still there. Emery was not. School, he remembered. She'd said she came before school. The sign was still out, weighted down by the small tin. 4 bookmarks remained lined up in their careful rows. The thermos was gone. He stood there, looking at the empty table for longer than made sense. Then he did something he had not done since he was a young man. He made a decision based on nothing but the feeling in his chest. He went back inside, took the elevator to 47, walked past Carol, and stood in front of his office bookshelf. 3rd shelf from the top, behind a row of industry awards he'd stopped looking at years ago, a small wooden box. Dark, walnut simple clasp. He'd moved it from office to office for 25 years without ever opening it in front of anyone. He opened it now. Inside a folded piece of manuscript paper, the staff lines faded to pale gray. Notes written in pencil, some erased and rewritten, the paper soft from handling. Titled at the top in his own young handwriting for Miss Rose. When I'm ready. He had never been ready. He carried the box to his desk and sat down and looked at the notes for a long time. His right hand moved slightly, not quite playing, just the ghost of an old reflex fingers tracing shapes against the desktop that had no keys. At 2:15, Marcus called. Rose DeWitt, he said. Past July 14th. 79 years old. Calumet Avenue, Chicago, same address going back 40 years. She moved to New York 6 years ago to be near her son Earl and his daughter. A pause. Emery DeWitt, 8 years old, enrolled at PS 171. Earl DeWitt father works for a delivery company out of Queens. Billy said nothing. Billy? Marcus's voice shifted slightly, not softer exactly, but more careful. She kept the same address for 40 years. She never moved until she came here for the girl. Billy pressed his fingers against the bridge of his nose. She's real, Marcus said. The letter's real, the girl is real. Another pause. And from what I can tell, none of them know who you are beyond the name on the building. Emery knew my name, Billy said. She said it, Mr. Tucker, first time she saw me. Rose told her, Marcus said. The man named Tucker in the tall building on 52nd. She prepared that child to find you. Billy sat very still. She prepared her, he repeated. Yes. He thought about a 79-year-old woman in a New York apartment, knowing she was running out of time, folding a letter into quarters, pressing it into her granddaughter's hands. Explaining, look for the tall building. The man named Tucker. He'll know what it means. The weight of that settled on him slowly, the way cold settles not all at once, but in degrees, until you can't remember being warm. She sent a child to do what I should have done myself, Billy said quietly. Marcus didn't argue with that. If this story is reaching something in you, if you've ever left something unsaid, a promise, unkept a debt that couldn't be paid in money, hit like, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Tell us in the comments where are you watching from today. We read every single one. Now, back to Billy Tucker, because what he does next surprised everyone, including himself. Billy did not sleep well that night. He lay in the penthouse bedroom, California King Italian linen blackout curtains that cost more than his first car, and stared at the ceiling and listened to the city. Manhattan at 2 in the morning sounds like something that never fully exhales. taxis, a distant siren, the low mechanical hum of a building that never stops working even when everyone inside it has gone home. He got up at 3, walked to the living room in bare feet past the kitchen where the housekeeper had left everything clean, and arranged past the dining table where he ate alone most nights to the far end of the room where the Steinway sat. It was a Model B, concert grand, 6 feet 10 inches ebony polish. He had paid $87,000 for it. The designer had placed it in front of the north-facing window, angled slightly so that it caught the city light in a way that looked intentional, deliberate, like a statement. It had never been played. Billy stood in front of it in the dark. The lid was closed. He put one hand on the fallboard, the cover over the keys, and stood there for a moment, not lifting it. Then he went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and went back to bed. He was at the building by 6:50 the next morning. Raymond pulled up to the curb and Billy was out of the car before it fully stopped, which was not like him. He stood on the sidewalk and looked. The table was there. The sign, Emery's bookmarks, $2 each, all handmade, the tin, the thermos, but no Emery. 6:50 was too early, he realized. She'd said 6:15. He had missed her by 35 minutes. He stood there feeling something that took him a moment to identify. It was the specific frustration of a man who had organized his entire life around never missing anything now, standing on a sidewalk having missed the one thing that mattered. He went inside. At 7:40, Carol knocked on his office door. "Mr. Tucker, there's a child in the lobby asking for you." He was already reaching for his jacket. Emery was standing near the security desk with her backpack on, holding her thermos in both hands. She was in her school uniform, dark navy skirt, white blouse, the lavender coat over the top. When she saw Billy come through the turnstile, she didn't wave, didn't call out. She just waited patient as a person 3 times her age. "You came early today," she said. "I did," he said. "I missed you." She considered this. "You could have just waited." He almost laughed. It came out as something smaller, a breath, not quite a smile. "You're right, I could have." He nodded to the security desk and the guard Frank, who had worked the lobby for 11 years and had seen Billy Tucker walk through those doors thousands of times, stepped back slightly and found something important to look at on his computer screen. Billy crouched down slightly, not quite to her level, his knees objected, and looked at her directly. "Emery," he said, "I read your grandmother's letter." She nodded. "I knew Rose," he said. "A long time ago, when I was young." "I know," she said. "She told me." "What did she tell you?" Emery tilted her head slightly, the way children do when they're deciding whether the adult in front of them deserves the full answer. "She said you were the boy from 2 doors down who could hear a song once and play it back perfectly," she said. "She said you used to practice at her piano for 3 hours and forget to eat dinner." A pause. "She said the last time she saw you, you were carrying a bag and you told her you'd come back and play her something beautiful." Emery looked at him steadily. "She waited a long time." Billy straightened up. He put both hands in his jacket pockets because he didn't know what else to do with them. "I know," he said. "She wasn't angry," Emery said, quickly, like she wanted to make sure he understood this. "She told me that. She said she wasn't angry, she just—" She paused, choosing words carefully. "She said she wanted to hear it, before she was gone, but she ran out of time." The lobby was moving around them. People coming through the turnstiles, coffee cups and handphones out the ordinary machinery of a workday. None of them looked twice at the man in the $4,000 suit, crouching slightly to talk to the 8-year-old in the lavender coat. "She said you'd know the song," Emery added quietly. "She said you'd know the song." There it was again. 3rd time now. Billy felt it differently, each time the first time like a key turning in a lock he'd forgotten existed. The 2nd time like the lock opening. This time like the door actually moving. He stood up straight. "Can I ask you something?" he said. She nodded. "Your grandmother Rose. Did she ever play for you?" Something changed in Emery's face. Not dramatically, just a small softening around the eyes, the particular expression people get when a question lands somewhere private. "Every Sunday," she said, "on her keyboard. The little one, the black one she kept in her bedroom." She wrapped both hands more tightly around her thermos. She didn't play like concerts or anything. She just played the same songs over and over, hymns, and one song she said she was waiting to teach to someone. "What song?" Emery shook her head. "She said it wasn't hers to teach. She said the person who wrote it would have to play it first." Billy said nothing. "I used to sit on her bed and watch her hands," Emery said. "Her hands knew things her mouth didn't have to say." She looked up at him. "Do you know what I mean?" He knew exactly what she meant. He had felt it himself once a lifetime ago, the way music moves through the hands without asking permission from the mind older than thought, more honest. "Yes," he said, "I know what you mean." He called Marcus at 9. "I need everything," he said. "Not just the confirmation. I need the full picture. Rose's last months, medical records if you can access them, what she left behind, where she was living, what Earl's situation is." He paused. "And whatever you can find on Emery, school records, anything relevant." "Billy," Marcus started carefully, "I'm not investigating them," Billy said. "I'm trying to understand what I walked away from." He pressed 2 fingers against his collarbone, an old habit when he was working something out. "I left at 22, and I told myself the story a certain way for 25 years. I need to know the actual story." A pause on the line. "Understood," Marcus said. "I'll have something by end of day." Marcus came at 5:30 after the last of Billy's meetings had cleared out. He sat in the same chair as before, but this time he had a folder. Not thick, Marcus was not a man who padded his reports, but substantial enough. He set it on the desk. Billy opened it. Rose DeWitt had been diagnosed with a congestive heart failure 14 months before she died. She had managed it quietly the way she managed most things, without drama, without asking much from anyone. Earl had not known the full severity until the last 2 months. She had kept it from him deliberately. She didn't want to be a burden, Marcus said. Billy turned a page. Rose had lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in Jackson Heights, Queens. Small, but kept with care, the building super's statement noted she always had flowers in the window box and never missed a rent payment. Earl paid the rent. She had almost nothing in savings, less than $300 when she passed. What she owned, a keyboard, a wooden cross, a box of photographs, a small collection of gospel records, and one item listed at the bottom of the inventory that made Billy go very still. One handwritten music manuscript, paper-aged, pencil notation. Title, for Miss Rose, When I'm Ready. Kept in Bible Book of Psalms. He read the line 3 times. She had kept his manuscript in her Bible. He had a copy in a walnut box in his office. She had kept hers tucked in the Book of Psalms for 25 years. She kept it, he said. He wasn't really talking to Marcus. He was talking to the room, to the air, to the 25 years between then and now. Yes, Marcus said quietly. She kept it. Billy closed the folder, pressed both palms flat on the desk. Outside the window, the city was going orange with evening, the light coming through the glass at a low angle, warm. He thought about a woman in a 2-bedroom apartment in Queens, $300 to her name, folding his manuscript into the pages of her Bible, keeping it for 25 years. Not with bitterness. Rose had never been a bitter woman. She had kept it the way you keep a photograph of someone you loved who did not love you back, well enough not as a reproach, as a record. Proof that something real happened, even if it was never finished. He had made $4.2 billion. She had died with less than 300, and she had kept his song in her Bible. "Marcus," he said. His voice was steady. It cost him to keep it that way. "What does Earl need right now, practically? What does that family need?" Marcus had anticipated this. He opened to a specific page in the folder. "Earl's lease is up in February," he said. "The apartment's too small for him, and Emery, she's sleeping in the living room on a pullout. He's been on a wait list for a 2-bedroom for 8 months. His car needs transmission work he's been putting off for 3 months because he can't afford the repair." He paused. "Emery is on partial scholarship at her school. There's a balance outstanding of about $400 that Earl's been paying in installments." Billy listened to all of it. "Fix the car," he said. "Pay the school balance, and find them a 2-bedroom. A good one, not charity housing. A real apartment fair lease somewhere safe. Put it through the foundation so it doesn't come back to me personally." He paused. "Earl doesn't seem like a man who would accept something he thought was pity." "He isn't," Marcus confirmed. Then frame it right." Billy stood moved to the window. The orange light was fading now, the city settling into its evening blue. "And Marcus, the manuscript she kept Rose's copy, can we get it?" "Earl has the estate effects," Marcus said. "I can ask." "Ask carefully," Billy said. "Explain what it is. Let him decide." Marcus nodded, closed the folder, stood. He was at the door when Billy spoke again. "She had $300, Billy said. He wasn't asking a question. He was just putting it somewhere outside himself because it was too heavy to keep only inside. $300, and she kept my song in her Bible." Marcus stood in the doorway. "Some people," he said carefully, "measure things differently than we do." He left. Billy stood at the window until the city was fully dark. He didn't turn on the lights. He stood in the dark in his own building and let the weight of 25 years settle onto him the way it had always been waiting, to patient, unhurried, certain. Like a little girl in a lavender coat on a sidewalk on 52nd Street. Like a folded piece of paper worn soft from being held too many times. Like a song that had been waiting in the pages of a Bible for someone to finally be ready. Billy sent the car for Earl on a Thursday. He had not planned it that way, had not planned much of it at all, which was unusual for him. Billy Tucker was a man who planned. He planned quarters and fiscal years and contingencies for contingencies. He had a whiteboard in his office with a 5-year projection that his CFO called obsessively detailed, and his ex-wife had once called less charitably a substitute for an actual inner life. But this Emery Rose the Letter the song this had not gone through the whiteboard. It had gone through something older and less organized. Marcus had handled the preliminary arrangements quietly the way Marcus handled everything. The school balance was paid through the Tucker Foundation's General Education Fund. No name attached, just a notation anonymous donor full clearance. The car repair had been routed through a garage in Queens that did work for the foundation occasionally. Earl would receive a call saying his vehicle had been selected for a free maintenance program through his employer's benefit package. It was a small fiction. Billy had authorized it without enjoying it. The apartment was more complicated. A real 2-bedroom in a safe neighborhood in Queens at a fair rent available in 6 weeks. Marcus had found one through a property management company the foundation used. The lease would be structured cleanly. Earl would pay market rate. Billy would cover the difference through the foundation without Earl knowing the differential. It was the kind of arrangement that required care to get right, and Marcus was good at care. What Billy had not planned was meeting Earl himself. That had been Emery's doing. She had come back Monday morning, same time, same table, same lavender coat. Billy had made a point of being downstairs at 6:15. He'd told Raymond 6 sharp, which meant he was standing outside in 40-degree air for 15 minutes before her. Raymond had offered to wait in the car. Billy had said no. She arrived at 6:18, pulling a small-wheeled cart with the folding table strapped to it. She got the whole setup deployed, Table unfolded bookmarks laid out sign-propped tin placed thermos set beside it in under 4 minutes. Billy watched her do it. "You're efficient," he said. "I only have until 7:40, she said, adjusting a bookmark. "Then I have to go, so I don't waste time." "Can I buy one?" he asked. She looked at him. "You already bought one, the blue one." "I lost it." He had, in fact, not lost it. It was on his desk, leaning against the walnut box. But he wanted to buy another one, and he wasn't sure why he didn't just say that. "That's okay," she said, and held out the display for him to choose. He picked a green one this time. Pale watercolor, the color of shallow water over sand. Thin yellow ribbon. He paid his $2 and put it in his jacket pocket. They stood in a comfortable quiet for a moment. Comfortable in the way that silences with certain people are comfortable, where the absence of words doesn't feel like something missing. "My dad knows," Emery said. Billy looked at her. "About you. About Grandma Rose and the letter." She straightened the tin slightly. "I told him last week. He wanted to know why I was coming here every morning." She glanced up. He wasn't happy at first. What was he unhappy about? She considered the question, seriously giving it real thought. "He said he didn't want me bothering important people," she said. "And he said he didn't want anyone thinking we needed things from them." She paused. "He was using his careful voice. That's what I call it when he's really worried, but he's trying not to show me." Billy understood careful voices. He had used one for 25 years. "What did you tell him?" he asked. "I told him. Grandma Rose asked me to do something, and I did it," she said simply. "And that you were nice and you didn't make me feel like I was bothering you." She looked up at him. "You didn't, just so you know." "I know," he said. "You didn't bother me." "He still wants to meet you," she said. "He said if his daughter is going to keep talking to a stranger, he should know who the stranger is." A small pause. "He's not actually calling you a stranger. He knows your name. He just—" She tilted her head. "He's protective. Since Mom died, he's extra protective." Billy filed that away quietly. Since Mom died. He did not ask. She had offered it simply without invitation for more, and he respected the boundary of it. "Tell your father I'd like to meet him too," he said. "If he's willing." She nodded, like this was already decided. "Thursday," she said. "He doesn't have deliveries until 10 on Thursdays." Earl DeWitt was 34 years old and looked like a man who had been carrying something heavy for a long time and had gotten so used to it that he no longer noticed the weight. He was tall, taller than Billy had expected, with broad shoulders and careful hands. He wore a clean button-down and dark slacks slightly too formal for the coffee shop on 51st, where they'd agreed to meet the kind of overdressing that meant he had put thought into it. He arrived first. Billy saw him through the window before he went in. Earl sitting at a corner table, Emery beside him in her school uniform. Earl turning his coffee cup in slow circles on the table without drinking it. Billy went in. Earl stood when he approached. They shook hands. Earl's grip was firm without performance, the grip of someone who didn't need to prove anything but wasn't going to suggest uncertainty either. "Mr. Tucker," Earl said. "Billy," Billy said. "Please." Earl nodded once, sat back down. Emery was looking between the two of them with the attentiveness of someone monitoring a situation. For a moment, nobody said anything. Then Earl said, "She told me about the letter. About Rose and the piano lessons and the promise." He said it evenly, but Billy could hear what was underneath, not accusation, not quite, but something that needed to be acknowledged before anything else could happen. "My mother kept a lot of things to herself. I didn't know half of it until she was gone. I didn't know she was ill," Billy said. He wanted that on the table immediately, not as excuse, but as fact. "I didn't know she'd moved to New York. I should have known. I should have looked, but I didn't." Earl studied him for a moment. "Why not?" he asked. It was a direct question, not hostile, just direct. The question a man asks when he genuinely wants to understand and has decided not to dress it up in politeness. Billy had thought about how to answer this. He had rehearsed several versions on the way over. All of them, when he tried them in his head, had sounded like justifications. So he set them aside and said the true thing instead. Because going back would have meant admitting I left something unfinished, he said. And I built my whole life on the idea that I was someone who finished things. He paused. It was easier to keep going forward than to turn around and see what I'd left behind. Earl looked at him for a long time. Emery was watching her father's face. "She didn't blame you," Earl said finally. "She said that herself more than once. But I want you to understand." He stopped, started again. "She lit up when she talked about you, even at the end. She'd say, 'That boy had something in him, Earl, something real.'" His voice didn't waver, but something around his eyes did barely. "I used to think it was just how she was about everyone, but it wasn't. It was specifically you." Billy absorbed that slowly. "She was the first person who ever told me I was good at something," he said. "Not good for my situation, not good considering just good." He looked at the table. "I was 12 years old. I didn't know what to do with that except run toward it. I ran so far, I ran past her." Earl was quiet. "Emery told me you play piano," he said after a moment. "I used to," Billy said, "a long time ago. She told me about the manuscript, the one you wrote." Earl looked at him steadily. "My mother kept a copy in her Bible." "I know," Billy said. "Marcus, my lawyer, he told me. I'd like to—" He stopped. "If you'd be willing, I'd like to see it, her copy, not to take it, just to see it." Earl reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. Billy went still. Earl set a folded piece of paper on the table between them. Not new, old the paper, the color of weak tea, the fold lines deep and soft from 25 years of opening and closing, but handled with care, kept with care. "She carried it with her when she moved up here," Earl said. "Had it in her Bible the whole time. I found it when we were going through her things." He looked at Billy. "I figured you should have it." Billy did not reach for it immediately. He looked at it the way you look at something that carries a weight out of proportion to its size, the way you look at a photograph of someone you can't get back, or a letter you should have written sooner. Then he picked it up. He unfolded it carefully. The pencil notations were faded but legible. The staff lines still visible. His own handwriting at the top, 22 years old, certain and a little unsteady the way young handwriting is for Miss Rose. "When I'm ready." The notes came back to him. Not all at once in pieces the way a language returns after long absence. A phrase here, a chord there. The particular run in the third measure that had taken him a week to work out, sitting at Rose's upright, while she brought him sweet tea and told him to slow down. Slow down. Feel it before you play it. His right hand moved against his thigh, not playing, just remembering the shape. "She said you'd know the song," Emery said. She had been quiet for so long he had almost forgotten she was there. He looked at her. "Yes," he said. This time he said it differently than before, not uncertain, not weighted, just true. "I know the song." Earl looked at his daughter. Something passed between them. Quick quiet, the private language of two people who had learned to read each other in the absence of a third. Then Earl looked back at Billy. "She never asked for much," he said. "My mother, her whole life. She gave and didn't ask for much in return." He folded his hands on the table. "She asked for one thing." "I know," Billy said. "I'm not asking you to feel guilty," Earl said. "She wouldn't want that. But I am asking you." He paused, choosing the word deliberately. "I'm asking you to finish it. Whatever it takes, finish what you started with her. Billy looked at the manuscript in his hands, at the faded pencil notes, at the title written in the handwriting of a 22-year-old boy who had believed sincerely that he would come back. "I will," he said. He meant it the way you mean something when you have run out of reasons to mean it halfway. Emery, beside her father, said nothing. She just wrapped both hands around her thermos, the same gesture as always. Small hands, holding something warm, and watched Billy Tucker look at the piece of paper his own younger self had left behind. Outside the coffee shop window, the city moved through its ordinary Thursday. Deliveries and meetings and 1,000 small transactions between strangers. None of it touched the table in the corner where a man was beginning slowly and without ceremony to turn around. Billy opened the Steinway on a Friday night. Not dramatically. There was no moment of decision, no standing in the dark, steeling himself. He came home at 8 later than usual, ate the dinner his housekeeper had left covered in the refrigerator without tasting much of it, and then walked to the piano and opened the fallboard the way you finally open a window in a room that has been closed too long. The keys were ivory and black, clean, untouched. The housekeeper dusted the body of the instrument but had never lifted the cover. She had asked once early on whether she should polish the keys. Billy had said he'd take care of it. That was 8 years ago. He sat down on the bench. It was the right height, adjustable, and someone at the store had set it correctly when they delivered it. He had never sat on it before. It was firmer than he expected. He put both hands in his lap and looked at the keys for a moment. Then he placed his right hand on the keyboard. Middle C, he pressed it once. The sound moved through the penthouse the way sound moves through a large, empty space fully without competition finding every corner. It was a good instrument. Of course it was. It had cost $87,000, and no one had ever played it. And it had sat in perfect tune for 8 years because the housekeeper, without being asked, had quietly arranged for a tuner to come annually because she thought it was a shame to let something that beautiful go to waste. He had not known that until Marcus mentioned it offhandedly a year ago. He pressed C again. Then he placed the manuscript on the music stand, his copy from the walnut box, because Earl's copy he had refolded with care, and put in the inside pocket of his jacket where it had stayed all week close. He looked at the first measure. The piece was called, in his own young handwriting, simply for Miss Rose. He had never given it a proper title. At 21, he had thought titles were something you added at the end after the piece was truly finished. He had never reached the end. What existed was 3 pages of manuscript paper. The first 2 pages were relatively complete melody. Clear harmony sketched dynamics noted in his looping pencil marks. Soft, here, build slowly, don't rush the turn. The third page was fragmentary. A phrase, a gap, another phrase. Question marks in the margins. One section crossed out entirely and rewritten, then crossed out again. He had not finished it because he had run out of time, or rather, he had run out of patience, which at 21 had felt like the same thing. He was leaving Chicago. He had a plan. The piece would be finished later properly when he had real training, real equipment, real knowledge. He would do it right, or not at all. He had done it not at all. He played the first measure now. His fingers remembered more than he'd expected. The body holds music differently than the mind does. The mind forgets in clean erasures, but the fingers forget slowly, incompletely, the way a river forgets a stone. The shape of it remains even after the stone is gone. The first phrase came back in pieces, halting, uncertain, a few wrong turns. But underneath the rust and the hesitation, the structure was still there, intact, waiting. He played it again, and again. By the 4th repetition, it was cleaner. By the 7th, something loosened in his shoulders that he had not known was tight. He stopped trying to remember and started listening to the room, to the instrument, to the thing the notes were doing to the air. Rose's voice came back to him not as grief exactly, but as presence. Slow down. Feel it before you play it. He slowed down. He had been 11 years old the first time he sat at her piano. He had heard it through the wall. Her apartment was 2 doors down from his mother's, the walls thin the way walls are in buildings that were built fast and cheap and expected to last longer than they should. He had heard music drifting through on a Tuesday evening, not recorded music, live music, someone actually playing, and he had followed it without thinking the way you follow a smell that reminds you of something good. He had knocked on her door, not knowing what he would say. Rose had answered. She was 60, then not old to him now, but enormous, then a large, warm presence in a floral house dress with reading glasses pushed up on her head. She looked at him with the particular expression of a woman who has seen many children knock on many doors. "You heard the piano," she said. It was not a question. "Yes, ma'am." She opened the door wider. "Come in, then." He had gone in. The apartment was smaller than his mother's, but warmer every surface holding something, photographs, small plants, a ceramic rooster on the windowsill, gospel records, and a milk crate by the wall. The piano was against the far wall, an old upright black, the finish worn to brown at the corners. She sat back down on the bench and played a few more bars of whatever she'd been playing, a hymn he would learn later. His eye is on the sparrow, and then stopped and looked at him. "You want to try?" He had nodded. She moved over on the bench. He sat beside her, close, the way you sit when the bench is small. And there is nothing self-conscious yet about proximity when you are just a child, and she is just a person, and the piano is just a piano. "Put your right hand here," she said. "Fingers curved, like you're holding an orange." She demonstrated her thick-knuckled hand arching over the keys, easy and natural. "You play like you're slapping it. It'll sound like you're slapping it. You play like it's something you're asking." She pressed a key gentle. The note came out soft, round, warm. "It'll sound like that." He had practiced asking ever since. For 3 years, Tuesdays and Thursdays, he had sat at her piano. She never charged his mother. She fed him dinner before he went home most nights, whatever she was making, always enough, always good. She listened to him practice the same phrase 40 times without telling him to stop. She told him when he was rushing, when he was forcing, when he was close but not quite there yet. She lent him records. She talked to him about musicians he had never heard of. She told him, once quietly, that he had a gift, and said it the way she said everything without drama, as simple fact as if pointing out that the sky was blue, and he had carried it out of her apartment that evening and turned it over in his hands for weeks. He had been 12. He was 47 now. He sat at the Steinway and played the first 2 pages of the manuscript through without stopping, and thought about the distance between 12 and 47, what it contained, what it cost, what got lost in the crossing. The 3rd page was the problem. He had always known somewhere underneath that the 3rd page was where the piece fell apart, not because he had been bad at it, but because at 21 he had not yet lived enough to finish it. The first 2 pages were about longing, about a kind of reaching toward something just out of range. The 3rd page needed to be about arrival, about return, and at 21 he had never returned to anything. He hadn't known how to write that. He understood now that the piece had been waiting all this time not to be finished from memory, but to be finished from experience. It needed what he had now, the weight of 25 years, the knowledge of what it costs to be someone who keeps moving forward and never looks back, the specific grief of sitting in a penthouse 47 floors above everything you started with, and understanding fully what you traded to get there. He played to the end of page 2, stopped where he had always stopped. The unfinished 3rd page sat on the stand. He looked at the fragments, the crossed-out measures, the question marks, the phrase started and abandoned. He didn't touch them yet. Instead, he sat in the silence the piano left behind and let himself think about something he had spent 25 years not thinking about. His mother. She had died when he was 31. He had been in Tokyo on a deal when it happened a Tuesday. Marcus had called, and Billy had finished the meeting before taking the next flight home, because the meeting was at a critical stage and his mother would have understood. She always understood. She had spent his whole childhood understanding that his needs came before he stopped that thought before it finished. He sat very still. He had finished the meeting. His mother died on a Tuesday and he finished the meeting. Rose had kept his manuscript for 25 years in her Bible. His mother had died on a Tuesday and he had finished the meeting. The penthouse was very quiet. He pressed his palms flat against his thighs. Outside the window, the city made its noise indifferent, beautiful, relentless. 47 floors of glass and steel between him and the ground. His name on the building. $4.2 billion. A career so large it had its own gravity, pulling everything into orbit around it. He thought about a boy on a piano bench next to an old woman who smelled of lavender soap. He thought about Feel It Before You Play It. He thought about what Rose had written, that boy was my favorite version of you, Billy. He sat at the piano for a long time. Not playing, just sitting with it. The way you sit with something that is too big to solve but too important to put down. At some point, the city outside the window went from orange to purple to the deep blue-black of real night, and Billy didn't turn on the lights, and the only illumination was the ambient glow of Manhattan coming through the glass, soft and enormous. At 11:15, he placed his hands back on the keys. He did not play the manuscript. He played something else, something that was not written down anywhere, that came out of the silence and the dark, and the 25 years, and the letter in his jacket pocket. A melody he had not planned. Simple, slow-moving, in the way that water moves when there is no hurry, when it has found its own level. He played it through once, then again adding something in the left hand. He was not thinking about structure or form. He was not thinking about the right notes or the wrong ones. He was just listening to what his hands knew without asking permission from his mind. Rose had taught him that. He had just needed 25 years and an 8-year-old girl in a lavender coat to remember it. He played until midnight. When he finally stopped, the penthouse was very quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet than before. Not empty quiet, but the quiet a room has after music, when the sound has dissolved into the walls and the air still holds the shape of it. He closed the fallboard gently. He sat for another moment in the dark. Then he took Earl's copy of the manuscript from his jacket pocket, unfolded it carefully and set it on top of the piano, not on the music stand, just resting on the lid flat, where he could see it first thing in the morning. For Miss Rose. When I'm ready. He was not ready. He knew that. The third page was still unfinished, the piece still incomplete, 25 years of living not yet translated into something he could play for an 8-year-old girl and say, here. This is what I owe. But for the first time in 25 years, he was not moving forward. He was turning around. Earl called on a Wednesday morning. Billy was in the middle of a conference call with his Singapore office when his personal cell lit up. Not the work phone, the personal one, the number he gave to maybe 11 people in the world. He saw Earl's name on the screen and excused himself from the call without explaining why, which he had never done before in 16 years of Singapore calls. He picked up. Mr. Tucker. Earl's voice was careful, not angry, but careful in the way that means something is being held back until the speaker decides whether to let it go. I need to talk to you about Emery. Billy sat forward. Is she all right? She's fine. She's at school. A pause. It's about the apartment. Billy went still. Marcus had told him the arrangement was clean. Foundation money, third-party lease, no visible connection to Billy Tucker. Earl would never know the differential was being covered. It had been set up carefully. The apartment, Billy said. Someone at the property management company, Earl said, made a mistake. They sent the lease confirmation to my email with a cover note referencing the Tucker Foundation. His voice was even, precise, the voice of a man who had decided to be calm about this. "I want to know if you're behind it." Billy closed his eyes briefly. He could deny it. The machinery was there. Marcus could handle the explanation, smooth it over, turn it into a coincidence. Earl might believe it. Or Earl might not, but might choose to let it go because the apartment was good and Emery needed a bedroom. And sometimes people let things go when the alternative is worse. He could do that. He didn't. "Yes," he said. "I am." The silence on the other end lasted 4 seconds. Billy counted them. "I see," Earl said. "Earl, she's not a charity case." The calm cracked just slightly, just enough. "My daughter is not a charity case. My mother didn't send her to you so you could—" He stopped. "We don't need to be fixed." "I know that," Billy said. "That's not what I was trying to do." "Then what were you trying to do?" Billy pressed 2 fingers against his collarbone. The old habit, working it out. "Your mother gave 3 years of free piano lessons to a kid who showed up at her door," he said. "She fed him dinner twice a week. She kept his unfinished manuscript in her Bible for 25 years. He paused. "I have $4.2 billion, and I can't give it back to her. So I was trying to give something, anything, to the people she loved, because I didn't know what else to do with the size of what I owe." Another silence. Longer this time. "That's honest," Earl said finally. His voice had come down slightly from the edge. "I should have told you," Billy said. "That was wrong. I should have asked, not arranged. I'm sorry." A long breath on the other end. "The car," Earl said. "That was you too." "Yes." "The school balance." "Yes." Earl said nothing for a moment. Billy waited. He was not a man who was good at waiting. His whole career had been built on moving into silences, filling them, turning them into action. But this particular silence he respected. Earl was owed the time to sit in it. "My daughter likes you," Earl said at last. The edge was gone now. What was left was something more complicated. Not quite forgiveness, not quite acceptance, something still in motion. "She doesn't like many people. She's particular, always has been even when she was small." A pause. "Rose was the same way. Particular." "Emery is like her," Billy said. "The way she sees things. I know." Something shifted in Earl's voice, not softness exactly, but the slight lowering of a weight that had been carried too long at full height. "The apartment. I can't pay the full market rate. I don't want to pretend I don't know what you're doing." "I know. But I'm not going to take something for nothing," Earl said. "That's not how I raised my daughter, and it's not how my mother raised me." "What would you need to make it feel right?" Billy asked. Earl thought about it. Really thought Billy could hear the quality of the silence, the difference between a pause that is gathering and a pause that is just uncomfortable. "Let me do something useful," Earl said finally. "I don't know what, but let me contribute something real, not just cash I don't have. If there's work I can do through your foundation, deliveries, logistics, whatever they need, I want to be part of earning this. Not a handout, a trade." Billy felt something ease in his chest. "I can arrange that," he said. "Honest work, fair pay separate from the apartment. 2 different things." "2 different things," Earl agreed. They were quiet for a moment. Outside Billy's office window, the city moved through its morning. "Mr. Tucker," Earl said. "Billy?" A brief pause. "Billy?" He said it like someone trying on a word in a new language, not uncomfortable, just deliberate. "She talks about you at dinner. She tells me what you said, what you bought from her table, what questions you asked." A pause. "She told me you asked her about Rose's hands, how they knew things her mouth didn't have to say." Billy said nothing. "That's a Rose thing to say," Earl said quietly. Rose used to say exactly that. I don't know how Emery knew to say it back to you, he paused. Maybe she just knows people. She does, Billy said. She knew me before I knew myself. That morning on the sidewalk, she wasn't asking me anything. She was just telling me something I already knew and had been pretending not to. Earl was quiet for a moment. She does that, he said. And for the first time faintly there was something in his voice that was almost a smile. 3 days later, on a Saturday, Billy was practicing. He had set a routine mornings at the piano before the workday started and evenings after it ended. An hour each time, sometimes more. Carol had noticed his calendar shifting the early morning blocks marked simply unavailable in a way they had never been before, and she had not asked about it, which was one of the many reasons Billy had kept Carol for 12 years. He was working on the 3rd page. It was still fragmented. The crossed-out measures were still crossed out. The question marks were still there. But he had added to it not tidily, not in the clean way he had imagined doing it at 21, but organically in layers the way you add to something real. New phrases in the margins. An alternate ending sketched, then another. The manuscript was getting crowded. He would need to transcribe a clean copy soon. His phone buzzed on the bench beside him. He ignored it. It buzzed again. He picked it up. A message from a number he didn't recognize, then realized he did. Emery had used Earl's phone once to send him a photo of a new bookmark design she was considering. Same number. The message was brief. Mr. Tucker, this is Emery. Can I come hear you practice sometime? Dad says I have to ask. He read it twice. She had never asked him for anything. In all the mornings on the sidewalk, through the letter and the coffee shop, and the conversations that had gradually grown longer and less careful, she had brought things to him, given things to him, delivered Rose's message with her small, certain hands. But she had never asked. He typed back, Saturday morning. 10 a.m. Ask your father to bring you. He set the phone down and looked at the manuscript. The 3rd page. He had been approaching it the way he approached problems analytically, structurally, looking for the gap and trying to fill it from the outside in. But the piece wasn't a problem. It was a question. And you didn't solve a question, you lived into the answer. He placed his hands on the keys. He played the first 2 pages through slowly, then stopped at the point where it had always stopped at the edge of page 2. The last complete measure, the note that hung in the air, asking for something that came next. He stayed there, sitting with the question. What came next was not he was beginning to understand something he could manufacture. It would come from the same place the first 2 pages had come from the boy who had sat on Rose's bench and felt the music asking rather than demanding. The 3rd page needed to feel like coming home. And you couldn't write coming home from the outside, you had to be inside it. He was not there yet, but he was closer than he had been on Friday, closer than he had been last week. He kept playing. Saturday at 10, Raymond brought Earl and Emery to the building. Billy met them in the lobby. Earl was in jeans and a jacket, more relaxed than the coffee shop, the slight over-formality replaced by something quieter and more comfortable. He shook Billy's hand with the same grip, firm without performance, and looked around the lobby with the steady attention of a man who notices things without making a production of noticing them. Emery was in a yellow sweater. No lavender coat. Saturday, no school, she was off duty. She had a small backpack on and her hair was down loose, longer than it looked in the puffs. She walked into the lobby and looked around at the marble and the height of the ceiling and the commissioned sculpture in the center, 12 feet of bronze, very expensive, very abstract, and then looked at Billy. It's very big, she said. It is, he agreed. Do you ever get lost? Not anymore, he said. But the first month I kept going to the wrong floor. She accepted this information and followed him to the elevator. In the elevator, Earl stood with his hands in his jacket pockets and watched the numbers rise. 47 floors. When the doors opened into the penthouse entryway, he was quiet for a moment, taking it in without comment. Emery walked in ahead of him and stopped in the middle of the living room and turned slowly, looking at everything: the windows, the city below the high ceiling, the art on the walls, the dining table with its 12 chairs, the kitchen, the hallway leading to the rest. Then she saw the piano. She walked straight to it without asking, stood in front of it, not touching, looking at it the way she had looked at the manuscript, with a kind of recognition, like something she had been told about and was now meeting. "This is the one," she said. "Yes," Billy said. "Have you been playing it?" "Every day this week." She turned to look at him over her shoulder. Something in her face shifted, not surprise, but something adjacent to relief. The expression of someone who had been hoping for a thing and had not quite let themselves believe it until now. "Grandma Rose would be glad," she said. Earl from across the room made a sound that was not quite words. He turned toward the window and looked at the city, and Billy did not look at him directly, because some moments are not for looking at. "Can I hear you play?" Emery asked. "That's why you're here," Billy said. He sat at the bench. Earl came and stood near the window, not too close, giving the moment its space. Emery stood beside the piano on the left side, close enough to see his hands, and folded her own hands in front of her in a gesture so like Rose's that Billy had to take one breath before he began. He played the first page. The room was very quiet around the music. Emery didn't move. She watched his hands with the focused stillness she brought to everything, the same attention she gave to straightening her bookmarks, to counting change, to choosing the right words. Total and unhurried. He played into the second page. Halfway through, he heard Earl shift by the window. A small sound breath, or the slight movement of a man adjusting his weight when something hits him somewhere he wasn't expecting. Billy kept playing. He reached the end of page 2, the hanging note, the edge of the unfinished place. He stopped. The silence after was the good kind, the kind that holds the shape of what just happened. Emery was looking at his hands still on the keys. "That's where it stops?" she asked quietly. "That's where it stops," he said. "For now." She looked up at him. "What comes after?" He looked at the keys for a moment. "I don't know yet," he said honestly. "I'm trying to find out." She nodded slowly. Not impatient, not disappointed. Just absorbing it the way she absorbed most things, fully and without resistance. "Grandma Rose used to say—" She stopped, started again more carefully. "She used to say that the end of a song is where the song tells you what it was really about all along." She looked at the piano. "She said most people rush to the end before they understand the beginning." Billy sat with that. From the window, Earl said quietly, not turning around, "She said that to me, too. About a lot of things. Not just music." The three of them were quiet for a moment in the large, bright room. 47 floors above the city. The billionaire at the piano. The delivery driver at the window. The 8-year-old girl standing beside the instrument with her hands folded, all of them thinking about a woman who had been gone since July and was somehow still very present. Then Emery looked at Billy and said in her matter-of-fact way, "She said you'd know the song." Third time. Always third time. But this time it landed differently than the first two, not like a key turning or a door opening. Like something already open, already entered, looking back at the threshold. "I know," he said. And this time he meant it all the way down. Marcus came to the penthouse on a Sunday. This was unusual. Marcus kept Sundays for his wife and their 2 grown children, and the crossword puzzle he did in pen, which Billy had always privately respected. In 16 years, Marcus had come to Billy's home on a Sunday exactly twice once, when a hostile takeover attempt had materialized overnight. And once, when Billy's ex-wife had filed for divorce on a Friday and served papers on a Saturday, and the whole thing needed to be handled before Monday morning. This Sunday was different. Billy had called him at 8 and said, "I need to finish the piece. I need help doing it properly. Can you come?" Marcus had arrived at 10 with coffee, and without the particular lawyerly neutrality he wore at the office. Sunday, Marcus was slightly different. Less formal, more direct, the version of the man who had known Billy since they were both in their 20s and had not yet learned to be careful with each other. He sat at the dining table and looked at the manuscript pages Billy had spread out. 3 pages of the original plus 4 additional sheets of Billy's recent additions phrases alternates margin notes the whole accumulated archaeology of the past 2 weeks. "Walk me through it," Marcus said. Billy stood at the head of the table. "Pages 1 and 2 are solid," he said. "Complete or close enough, the structure is there, the melody is there." He touched the 3rd original page. "This is where it falls apart. I wrote this at 21 and I couldn't finish it then, and I've been working at it for 2 weeks and I can get close, but there's something—" He stopped. "There's something I keep reaching for that I can't quite get to." Marcus looked at the pages. He was not a musician. Billy knew he could read music only barely, but Marcus understood structure. He understood the shape of problems. It was his particular gift. "Tell me what the piece is about," Marcus said. "Not technically, just what is it about?" Billy sat down. He had thought about this for 2 weeks without quite putting it into words. The playing had been easier than the explaining. "The first section is about wanting," he said slowly. "About being a kid who can hear music and doesn't have the tools yet. The longing of that. Something just out of reach." He paused. "The second section is about the work, learning, the discipline of it. Rose, teaching me not just music but how to listen, how to be patient with something." He looked at the 3rd page. "And this, the 3rd section, it needs to be about return, about coming back. But every time I try to write return, it sounds like resolution, like everything is fine, and it isn't fine. It shouldn't sound fine." Marcus was quiet, looking at him. "What does return actually feel like?" he asked. "For you, right now?" Billy pressed his fingers against the table. "Like grief," he said. "And also like relief. Both at the same time. Like putting something down that you've been carrying so long you forgot it was heavy." He paused. "Like sitting at that piano and playing for Emery and hearing her say that's where it stops and knowing she wasn't asking me to hurry. She was just witnessing." He looked at the window. "Nobody has witnessed anything I've done in a long time. Not like that." Marcus let the silence sit. "That's the 3rd section," he said. Billy looked at him. "Grief and relief at the same time," Marcus said. "Not resolution. Not everything made right. Just the weight of it, and also the setting it down." He tapped one of the margin notes. "You've written it already, right here." He pointed to a phrase in the margin of the 4th additional sheet, 4 bars, simple, written in pencil, in the loose hand of someone who was not trying to impress anyone. "Play that." Billy looked at it. He got up and went to the piano. Sat down. Found the 4 bars and played them. They landed differently out loud than they had in his head when he wrote them. Slower. More certain. The phrase turned at the end in a way he hadn't planned, a small downward move, not resolving to the tonic, but settling just beside it. Close, but not complete, the musical equivalent of almost home. He stopped, played it again. "That's it," Marcus said from the table. Billy played it a 3rd time, adding a left-hand line underneath that had been waiting in the back of his mind without permission. "That's it," Marcus said again. Billy kept playing. The phrase extended itself another measure, then another, not from thought but from the logic of the thing itself, the way a sentence sometimes knows where it needs to go before the writer does. He went back to the beginning of page 3 and played through it past the old stopping point into the new material, and for the first time in 25 years the piece did not stop. It moved, not to a grand resolution, not to a triumph. It moved the way a man moves when he is walking toward something he is not sure of, but is walking toward anyway steadily, with weight with knowledge. He played to what felt like an end. Stopped. The apartment was quiet. Marcus was still at the table, coffee cup in both hands, not moving. "Play it again," he said quietly. Billy played it again. They worked until 2 in the afternoon. Not frantically, there was no frenzy to it, no last-minute crisis energy. It was methodical, careful, the way real work usually is. Billy would play a section. Marcus would listen and ask questions, not musical questions, structural ones, the same questions he asked when reviewing a contract. What is this doing? Does it need to be here? Is this the clearest way to say it? Billy would adjust. Play again. By 1 o'clock, the 3rd page was complete. Not perfect. Billy did not believe in perfect. For this piece, perfection would have been wrong, but finished. True. It said what it needed to say and stopped when it needed to stop. He transcribed a clean copy by hand slowly the way he had been taught. Marcus watched him do it without speaking. When it was done, Billy set the pen down and looked at the 4 pages of manuscript. Clean, complete, the title at the top in fresh ink, now rewritten, "For Miss Rose." He had taken off "When I'm ready," because he was. "I want to ask you something," Billy said. They were at the dining table with the last of the coffee, the manuscript between them. "About that night, when I left Chicago." Marcus had not been there. He and Billy had met years later in New York in the early days of Tucker Corp. But he knew the story in pieces the way you know the foundational things about a person you've been close to for 2 decades. "You never talked about it much," Marcus said. "I know." Billy looked at the manuscript. "I left at 22. Middle of the night, more or less. I had a bus at 5:30 in the morning. I knocked on Rose's door at 4:45. He paused. She was already up. She opened the door in her housecoat and she wasn't surprised, like she knew I was coming. He was quiet for a moment. "I told her I'd come back. I told her when I made something of myself I'd come back and play her something beautiful." He paused. "She said I remember exactly what she said. She said, 'I know you believe that, Billy. I believe you believe it too.'" He pressed his fingers against the edge of the table. "Not, 'I believe you.' Just, 'I believe you believe it.'" Marcus said nothing. "She knew," Billy said. "At 4:45 in the morning in her housecoat, she knew I wasn't coming back." He looked at the window. "And she kept the manuscript anyway, for 25 years. "Yes," Marcus said. "Why?" Billy said. Not a rhetorical question. A real one, directed at Marcus because he was the person in the room and Billy genuinely needed an answer. Marcus thought about it. "I think," he said carefully, "because she loved the boy who wrote it. Not the man who didn't come back. The boy." He paused. "And she understood that the boy and the man were the same person even when the man forgot." Billy sat with that. "She sent Emery," he said. "She did. An 8-year-old girl with a folding table and $2 bookmarks." "Yes." "To the man with his name on the building." "Yes." Billy almost smiled. "It was small, not full, but it was real. She always had a sense of humor," he said. "Rose. She'd find something funny, and she wouldn't laugh out loud. She'd just get this look, like she was enjoying something privately." He paused. "Emery does that." "I've noticed," Marcus said. "She's going to be something," Billy said. Quietly, with the certainty of someone who has learned to recognize a particular quality when they see it. "She already is," Marcus said. They sat with that for a moment. "I want to do this right," Billy said. "The playing. I don't want it to be a performance. I don't want an audience. I don't want it to be an event." He touched the manuscript. "It should be small. Just Emery and Earl, maybe you." He paused. In this room, at this piano. When? Billy looked at the manuscript, the clean copy 4 pages complete. I need a week, he said, to learn it properly. All the way through from memory, no sheet music. He paused. Rose never played from sheet music. She said the music lives in you or it doesn't live. A week, Marcus said. I'll tell Earl. Don't tell Emery, Billy said. I want her to. He stopped, started again. She's been carrying Rose's message for months. I want the moment to be I want it to come to her, not to be announced. Marcus nodded. He began gathering his things. Jacket phone, the small notepad he carried everywhere, and wrote in with a fountain pen because he was a particular kind of man. At the door he stopped. Billy. He said it in the Sunday voice, not the office voice. What you're doing the piece, the practicing Emery Earl, none of this undoes what happened. You know that. I know that, Billy said. It doesn't pay the debt. I know, but it's still worth doing, Marcus said. Some things are worth doing, even when they're too late. Billy stood in the doorway of his apartment with the city 47 floors below and the completed manuscript on the table behind him. She said that too, he said. Rose. Different words, but the same thing. He paused. She used to say you give what you have when you have it. Late is better than never. Never is the only real waste. Marcus looked at him for a moment. You remember a lot of what she said, Marcus said. I remember everything she said, Billy said. I just spent 25 years pretending I didn't. Marcus left. Billy closed the door and went back to the piano and opened it and placed his hands on the keys and began to learn the completed piece from memory. All 4 pages beginning to end, the whole arc of it. The longing and the work and the grief and relief of return, until the city outside had gone from afternoon gold to evening blue, and his fingers no longer needed the page to know where they were going. He practiced every morning for 7 days. 6 o'clock before the city fully woke, before Raymond arrived, before Carol sent the first email of the day. The penthouse in the early morning had a particular quality of light gray-blue soft, the city below still half asleep, the noise reduced to something almost like quiet. Billy had never noticed it before. He had always been at his desk by 6 screen already on Tokyo, already in the afternoon Singapore, already closing. Now he was at the piano. The piece had 4 pages and took 11 minutes to play at the tempo he had settled on unhurried the way Rose had taught him. He played it through once at the start of each session, slowly listening. Then he worked it in sections. Then he played it through again at the end, trying to hear it the way someone else would hear it. Someone who had never seen the manuscript. Someone who only had the music. Monday, the first 2 pages were clean. The third was unsteady. Tuesday, the 3rd page was better. The new ending still surprised his hands at the last measure, the fingers not yet fully trusting the root. Wednesday he played it through 3 times without stopping. The 3rd time, something happened not technically different from the 2nd time, but different in the way that matters, the difference between playing notes and playing music. He sat afterward in the silence and did not move for several minutes. Thursday he practiced with his eyes closed. Rose had told him once, when you can play it in the dark, you own it. Until then it owns you. He had tried to play it in the dark at 21, and hadn't been able to, too young, too impatient, always wanting to check the page. Now he sat at the Steinway with his eyes closed and let his hands find their own way through. They found it, not perfectly. There was a stumble in the 2nd section, a moment where his left hand hesitated on a chord change. But the piece moved, it breathed, it went where it needed to go. Friday he called Earl. Tomorrow, he said. 10 in the morning, bring Emery. A pause on the line. Does she know? No, Billy said. Just tell her you're coming over. She'll know something's happening, Earl said. She always knows. That's all right, Billy said. Let her know something's happening, just not what. Saturday morning he was up at 5. He did not practice. He had decided Thursday that Friday would be the last practice day you could over-prepare a thing and sand away the life of it, turn something real into something merely correct. The piece was ready. He was ready. More practice would be about managing his own anxiety, not about the music, and managing anxiety at the expense of the music was exactly the kind of thing Rose would have called him out for. He made coffee, stood at the window, watched the city come up into the light. He thought about Rose at 4:45 in the morning, opening her door in her housecoat. Already up. Not surprised. I know you believe that, Billy. I believe you believe it too. He had believed it. That was the thing he had to hold on to. He had not been cynical at 22. He had not made a promise he knew he wouldn't keep. He had meant it fully, the way you mean things when you are young, and the future is something you are absolutely certain you will be in control of. The future had other ideas. He pressed his forehead briefly against the cold glass. 47 floors below, a delivery truck was double-parked on 50-second hazards blinking. A man in a reflective vest was unloading boxes with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done it 10,000 times. Billy watched him for a moment. Earl did that. 5 days a week, Earl got up before the city did and moved things from one place to another so that the city could keep running the way it always ran, and nobody who received the packages thought much about the man who brought them. Rose had 2 apartments and a keyboard and a Bible, and less than $300. Billy had 47 floors with his name on the building. He turned away from the window. They arrived at 10:03. Raymond texted from the lobby and Billy went down himself rather than having them sent up, which he could tell surprised Raymond slightly. The elevator ride down was 47 floors of Billy standing with his hands in his jacket pockets, breathing the way you breathe when you are trying to be calm and your body has not fully agreed to cooperate. The lobby doors opened and Earl was there in his jacket, and beside him Emery. She was wearing the lavender coat. Over a dress, a Saturday, dress pale blue with small white buttons. Hair in 2 puffs again, both, even this time, both neat. She had the thermos, the small one, the one she always carried, the one she wrapped her hands around when she was cold or thinking. She was not cold. She was just holding it. She looked at Billy when he came through the turnstile and her expression did the thing it sometimes did, that quick reading, that taking in assessing without judgment. "Hi, Mr. Tucker," she said. "Hi, Emery." He looked at her and Earl both. "Thank you for coming." Earl shook his hand. His grip had changed slightly over the weeks, still firm, but with less to prove. They were past the first handshake now. In the elevator, Emery looked at the numbers rising. 32, 33, 34. "Is something happening today?" she asked. "Yes," Billy said. "Something good." He thought about it honestly. "I think so. I hope so." She nodded and watched the numbers. 45, 46, 47. Marcus was already in the penthouse when they arrived. He had his own key, had for years, an arrangement from a period when Billy had traveled extensively and someone needed to be able to get in. He was standing near the dining table in his Sunday close, coffee in hand, and he nodded at Earl and smiled at Emery in the way he smiled at people he was genuinely glad to see, which was not his default expression. Emery looked at Marcus, then at Billy, then at the piano. The piano. Billy had left the fallboard open. First time it had been open when anyone else was in the apartment. The keys were visible ivory and black clean, the morning light coming through the north window falling across them in the particular way that had been making him pause every morning this week, the light and the keys together, looking like something that had always been waiting to be this. Emery walked to the piano. She stood in front of it, not touching, and looked at the keys. Then she looked at the music stand empty. He had taken the manuscript off. No sheet music, just the piano. She turned to look at him. "You're going to play it," she said. "Yes," he said. Something moved across her face. Not surprise, Earl had been right. She always knew something was coming. But the confirmation of it, the arrival of the thing she had been moving toward since that morning on the sidewalk, hit her differently than anticipation. She pressed her lips together briefly, not to suppress anything dramatic. Emery was not a dramatic child, but the way you press your lips together when something is large and you want to hold it carefully. "The whole thing?" she asked. "The whole thing," he said, including the part I hadn't finished. She looked at him steadily. "You finished it." "I finished it." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "When?" "A week ago Sunday," he said. "Marcus helped me find the end." She looked at Marcus briefly, then back at Billy. "Okay," she said, "just that." "Okay," the single syllable carrying more weight than most paragraphs. Earl stood near the window, the same spot as last time, slightly apart, giving the moment its room. Marcus set his coffee down and moved to the far end of the dining table. Emery stayed beside the piano on the left, close enough to see his hands. Billy sat down on the bench. He adjusted it slightly a half-inch lower, the way he had come to prefer this week. He placed his hands in his lap, looked at the keys for a moment. The room was very quiet. Outside the window, the city was doing what it always did: noise, movement, the 10,000 small urgencies of a Saturday morning in Manhattan. In here, quiet. The good kind, the kind a room earns. He placed his hands on the keys. The first note. It came out the way it had come out all week, clear, unhurried asking rather than demanding. He moved into the first phrase. His hands knew where they were going. He had worried this morning, standing at the window, that the nerves would change something, that playing for people would close something down, make him careful. In the wrong way, make the music about not making mistakes, rather than about the thing it was actually about. It did not. The first section moved. He could hear the room receive it, not see he had his eyes mostly down on his hands, but you can hear a room change when music comes into it, the air shifting slightly, the particular attention of people who are actually listening. He played through the first page, into the second. The second section, the working section, the discipline and patience of it, the long middle part of learning anything he had been most uncertain about this week. It was the least showy part of the piece. No memorable melody, just the harmonic structure doing its work underneath the musical equivalent of putting in the hours. On Thursday, with his eyes closed, it had felt right. Now it felt right in a different way, more present, more grounded, something to do with the room and the people in it and what this specific day was. He played through the second page, reached the original end, the hanging note, the place where it had always stopped. He did not stop. He moved into the third section, the new material. He had been afraid of this moment all week, not afraid of the notes, he knew the notes, but afraid that when it mattered the most, the ending would feel forced, manufactured, the wrong kind of resolution. He had told Marcus it needed to feel like grief and relief at the same time, and he had written it that way, but writing it and playing it in front of the people it was actually for were different things. The third section opened. He felt it immediately that it was right. Not in the sense of correct, in the sense of true. The phrase that Marcus had found in the margin moved through the room with a weight that was not sad, exactly, not happy, exactly, both at the same time, the way real things are. The left hand settled underneath it, the almost home chord close, but not complete, asking without demanding. He played through the third section. His hands found the final page, the new ending. 4 measures simple. The long resolution that was not quite a resolution, the piece settling rather than concluding, the way a person settles when they have put something down that was heavy and are still feeling the absence of the weight. He played the last measure, the last note. He held the sustain. Let it breathe. Let it be what it was. It faded. He took his hands off the keys. The room was very quiet. He sat with his hands in his lap and looked at the keys and did not turn around for a moment. He needed that moment. 11 minutes. 25 years. 4 pages. He needed 1 moment with it before it became something he had to talk about. Then he turned. Emery had both hands over her mouth. Not crying, her eyes were dry, wide, dark, fully present. Both hands over her mouth in the gesture of someone who has received something larger than they expected and is holding themselves together at the edges. Earl, at the window, had his back half turned, looking at the city. His shoulders were not entirely still. Marcus, at the dining table, had both hands flat on the table and was looking at them, not at Billy, the expression of a man who is feeling something and has decided to let himself feel it. Nobody spoke. Billy waited. Emery lowered her hands from her mouth slowly. She looked at him. "She said you'd know the song," she said. Her voice was quiet, steady, but something underneath it was not quite steady the way water is not quite still, even when it looks still. "She was right," Billy said. Emery nodded once. Her chin moved slightly on the nod, almost imperceptible, the small movement of someone who is keeping something contained, not because they are suppressing it, but because it is large, and they are being careful with it. Then she said something he had not expected. "Can I tell you something she said to me?" she asked. "Before she died. She said it the last time I saw her." "Yes," he said. Emery looked down at her thermos, both hands around it, and then looked back up at him. She said, a pause, choosing the words carefully, getting them exact the way Emery always got things exact. "Baby, when you find him, don't let him just give you things. Make sure he gives himself. That's the only thing worth having from a person." She looked at him steadily. She said that. Billy sat at the piano bench in the large quiet room. 47 floors above the city. He thought about $4.2 billion. About the school balance and the car repair and the apartment. About everything he had tried to give. He thought about 11 minutes and 25 years and 4 pages of manuscript paper. He thought about which of those things was the giving of himself. "I hear you," he said. Quietly, to Emery, to the room, to whatever of Rose was still in the air. Earl turned from the window. His eyes were red at the edges, but his face was composed the face of a man who cried rarely and was not embarrassed when he did, but did not make an occasion of it. "Thank you," Earl said. His voice was rough at the bottom. "For finishing it." Billy looked at him. "Thank your mother," he said. "She sent the right person." Earl looked at his daughter, Emery. For the first time since she had walked into Billy Tucker's life on a Tuesday morning with a folding table and $2 bookmarks and a piece of folded paper worn soft from being held for the first time, she smiled. Not a small smile, a real one. Full, unhurried, occupying her whole face the way Rose's smile had occupied her whole face generously without reservation. The smile of someone who has been waiting for a thing and is not surprised it arrived, but is glad, genuinely glad, that it finally did. Billy Tucker sat at the piano and looked at that smile and felt something loosen in his chest that had been tight for 25 years. The city moved outside the window, indifferent, beautiful, relentless. In here something finished, something finally given back. Nobody moved for a long time. That was the thing Billy remembered afterward, not the music, not the words, but the quality of the stillness that followed. The 4 of them in the large, bright room, the city doing its indifferent Saturday outside the glass, and inside a stillness that was not emptiness, but fullness, the way a room feels after something real has happened in it, and the air has not yet let it go. Emery was the first to move. She set her thermos down on the side table near the piano, carefully without sound, and walked to the bench where Billy was sitting and stood beside him the way she had stood beside Rose's keyboard on Sunday mornings, close, looking at the keys. "Can I touch it?" she asked. "Yes," he said. She reached out one hand and pressed a single key. Middle C. The same key Billy had pressed alone in the dark 10 days ago, the first night he opened the fallboard testing the room and the instrument and himself. The note came out clean and round and warm. She pressed it again. Then she pressed the key beside it. D. Then E, 3 notes slow, listening to each one the way Rose had taught Billy to listen, not for whether it was right, but for what it was saying. "Grandma Rose taught me these 3, she said. Just these. She said start with 3. Learn them all the way, then add 1 more. Billy looked at her small hand on the keys. "She told me the same thing," he said. Emery pressed the 3 notes again. C, D, E. Then stopped hand resting lightly on the keys without pressing. "I want to learn," she said. Not to Billy, specifically. More to the air the way children say true things without strategy, just setting them down. "I've always wanted to, but—" She paused. "We don't have a piano." Earl from the window said quietly, "Emery." She looked at her father. "I'm not asking," she said quickly. "I'm just saying." Earl looked at her for a moment, with the expression of a father who knows his child better than his child thinks, and is deciding how much to say about it. He decided on nothing, just nodded once and looked back at the window. Billy said nothing either, not yet. He filed it the way he filed important things not into action, into attention. He would think about it properly later without the heat of the moment, without the risk of giving before he had thought through the giving. Marcus began gathering himself at 11. He had a lunch, his wife, their daughter, visiting from Boston, a reservation he had made 3 weeks ago. He put on his jacket with the unhurried precision of a man who had decided this morning was complete, and was content with its completion. He shook Earl's hand. He looked at Emery and said, "It was very good to meet you properly." And she said, "You too, Mr. Webb." And he smiled at that, the specific smile of a man who has been called Mr. Webb by an 8-year-old and found it both correct and charming. At the door, Marcus turned to Billy. No words. Just a look, brief, direct, carrying 16 years of shorthand. Billy gave a small nod. Marcus left. The 3 of them were alone. It felt different without Marcus. Smaller, quieter, the particular intimacy of 3 people in a large room who have been through something together and are now on the other side of it in the ordinary hours after. Earl came away from the window and sat at the dining table. He moved with the slight stiffness of a man who had been standing in one position for a long time and was only now noticing it. He sat and folded his hands on the table and looked at Billy with the direct, uncomplicated gaze that Billy had come to recognize as simply how Earl looked at things straight on without decoration. "I want to ask you something," Earl said, "and I want you to know I'm not asking because I expect anything. I'm asking because I want to understand." "Go ahead," Billy said. "My mother," Earl said. "All those years she never tried to reach you. She had your name. She knew what you'd built. I found articles about you in her things printed out, folded up. She'd been following your career." He paused. "She never picked up a phone, never wrote a letter, just kept the manuscript and followed the news and said nothing." He looked at his hands. "Why do you think that was?" Billy thought about it honestly. "Because she wasn't waiting for me to give her something," he said. "She was waiting for me to be ready." He paused. "If she had reached out, if she had called or written, I would have done what I always did when the past came up. I would have sent money, made a donation to something in her name, found a way to be generous without being present." He looked at the piano. "She knew me well enough to know that." Earl was quiet. "So she waited," Billy said, "until I couldn't be generous without being present, until there was no version of doing right by her that didn't require me to actually—" He stopped. "To actually sit down and play." Earl looked at him for a long time. "She was patient," Earl said. "Her whole life. Patient in a way I never fully understood until recently." He paused. "I used to think it was just her nature, Now I think it was a choice. Every day a choice. Billy nodded. She chose to believe the boy was still in there somewhere, he said, even when the man made it hard to find him. Emery, sitting beside the piano with her thermos back in her hands, said nothing. She was listening the way she always listened, completely without interrupting, filing everything. At noon, Billy asked if they wanted to stay for lunch. He said it simply. Without production, Carol had stocked the kitchen for the week and there was enough. Earl looked at Emery. Emery looked at her thermos for a moment, then at Billy. "Yes, please," she said. They ate at the dining table, the long table with 12 chairs. 3 of them occupied the city outside the window. Billy had not eaten at that table with other people in longer than he could honestly remember. His ex-wife had preferred restaurants. He had preferred his desk. He made sandwiches. He was not a cook. His housekeeper usually prepared everything, but he could make sandwiches. Earl watched him do it with the mild attention of someone who is calibrating a person against what they expected, and Billy could feel himself being calibrated and did not mind. Emery ate with the focused efficiency of a child who had packed and unpacked her own lunch for long enough that eating was something she did seriously and without fuss. They talked about small things. Earl's delivery routes, he covered a section of Queens and part of Brooklyn, knew the neighborhoods the way you know places you've moved through 10,000 times, their moods and rhythms, and where the good coffee was, and where to park without getting a ticket. Emery's school, a project she was doing on migration patterns of monarch butterflies, which she explained with the precision of someone who found the subject genuinely interesting, and assumed you would too. Billy found he did. At one point, Earl said without leading up to it, "She told me once, Rose, that the best meals she ever had weren't the best food. They were the ones where everyone at the table was actually there." He looked at his plate. She said most people eat somewhere else in their heads. Billy thought about how many meals he had eaten somewhere else in his head. She was right, he said. Earl looked up and almost smiled. They left at 2. At the door, Emery put her lavender coat back on one button at a time, methodical. She picked up her thermos. She looked at Billy with those dark, steady eyes. "Thank you," she said. "For the song." "Thank you," he said. "For bringing the letter." She considered this the exchange, the accounting of it. "We're even," she said. He almost laughed. It came out fuller than usual, not the contained, almost laugh of the past weeks, but something more open surprised out of him. "We're even," he agreed. She nodded, satisfied, and went to stand by her father. Earl put his hand on her shoulder. Brief, light, the touch of a man who does not make productions of affection, but expresses it in small, consistent gestures. He looked at Billy. "I'll call you about the foundation work," he said. "The logistics arrangement." "Any time," Billy said. They shook hands. Earl and Emery went to the elevator. Billy stood in the doorway and watched the doors close. He went back to the piano. Not to practice, the piece was finished, played given. He sat at the bench and looked at the keys in the afternoon light, the city outside the window going toward the long golden horizontal of a late October afternoon. He was thinking about what Emery had said, make sure he gives himself, that's the only thing worth having from a person, and about the question of whether he had finally done that. Given himself. Not money, not arrangements, not the careful philanthropy of a guilty conscience. Himself. The music had been that. He knew it. 11 minutes of the thing that Rose had cultivated in him, that he had buried under 47 floors of ambition, played back into the air for an 8-year-old girl who had carried an old woman's faith in him across a sidewalk on 52nd Street. He sat for a while without playing. Then he placed his hands on the keys. He did not play for Miss Rose. That piece was done complete, given finished. He played something else. Something new, something without a name, yet that began the way things begin when they don't know yet what they are, tentatively, with the particular freedom of having no obligation, no promise attached, no debt to pay, just music. Just a man at a piano on a Saturday afternoon playing because he wanted to. He had not played for that reason in 25 years. He played for a long time. The city outside went orange, then pink, then the early blue of evening. He didn't turn on the lights. He played in the failing light until he could barely see the keys, and it didn't matter because his hands knew where they were, and the room knew what it was now. Not a showpiece, not a decorator's choice, not $87,000 of beautiful, unused potential. A room where music happened. He played until 8. Then he stopped and sat in the quiet, and in the quiet he heard something he had not heard in this apartment before, nothing missing. Not everything resolved. He was not a man who believed in clean resolutions, and Rose had not been a woman who pretended that debt could be fully paid or time fully recovered. But nothing missing. The particular absence that had been in this apartment since the day he moved in, the absence of something true, something earned, something that cost more than money, was gone. He closed the fallboard, gently, the way you close something that has been opened for the first time, and you want to honor the opening. He sat for one more moment. Then he picked up his phone and did something he had been meaning to do for 3 weeks, and had been approaching from the outside carefully, not wanting to get it wrong. He called Earl. Earl picked up on the second ring. "Billy," he said. The name easy now, natural. "I want to ask you something," Billy said, "about Emery, about the piano lessons." A pause on the other end. Careful, not defensive. "I want to teach her," Billy said, "myself. Not hire a teacher, I want to do it. Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, here at this piano." He paused. "I know what that means to ask. I know it's not a small thing, but I want to ask." He paused once more. "Rose taught me for free for 3 years. I'd like to pass that on, if you'll allow it." Silence on the line. Billy waited. Earl said, "Let me talk to Emery." "Of course," Billy said. "I'll call you tonight," Earl said. They said goodbye. Billy set the phone down on the bench beside him and looked at the closed fallboard and thought about Rose at her upright on Calumet Avenue, moving over to make room on the bench for a boy who had heard music through the wall and followed it without knowing why. "Put your right hand here, fingers curved, like you're holding an orange." He could still feel the bench, the close warmth of her beside him. The first note he had ever played on purpose, asking, rather than demanding, the sound coming out round and warm, and like something he had always known without knowing he knew it. His phone rang. Earl, 12 minutes faster than he'd expected. He picked up. "She said yes," Earl said. And there was something in his voice that was not quite the careful voice, not the composed voice, not any of the protective, measured voices Earl used when he was managing the size of something. It was just Earl. "She said to tell you," Earl continued, "that she already knows C, D, and E, so you don't have to start at the very beginning." Billy put his hand over his mouth, not to suppress anything, just to hold it for a moment, the fullness of it, the specific joy of a thing that had come around right when nothing required it to, when it could just as easily have been too late or too broken or too far gone. He took his hand away. "Tell her," he said, "that C, D, and E are exactly the right place to start." The first lesson was on a Tuesday. Earl brought Emery at 4 o'clock after school. She arrived in her uniform navy skirt, white blouse, backpack on, and went straight to the piano the way she always did, as if the instrument had a gravitational pull that bypassed the ordinary social requirement of settling in first. Billy was already at the bench. "Sit," he said, and moved to the right. She sat on the left side, close the way he had sat beside Rose 45 years ago. No self-consciousness about proximity. Just 2 people and a piano, and the space between being exactly the right size. Earl sat at the dining table with a coffee Billy had made and a paperback he had brought and did not watch. That was the right instinct. Billy noticed it and appreciated it. Some things needed not to be observed too carefully. "You know C, D, and E," Billy said. "Yes," Emery said. She played them. C, D, E clean, unhurried, each note given its full time. "Good," he said. "Now, I'm going to show you F." He placed her finger on F. She pressed it, listened. "What does it sound like?" he asked. She thought about it. "Like a question," she said. He looked at her. "Yes," he said, "exactly like that." They met every Tuesday and Thursday for the rest of that fall. It was not always easy. Emery was quick faster than Billy had expected, faster maybe than he had been at her age, but quick did not mean effortless. And there were Tuesdays when the same phrase refused to come right, and she would press her lips together and try again without being asked, and try again after that, the patience in her not passive but active. A choice made repeatedly. Billy recognized it. Rose had had the same patience. The same quality of trying without frustration, failing without discouragement, the understanding that the music would come when it came, and the only thing you could control was whether you showed up. He told her this one Thursday in November. "Your grandmother had this," he said, "this exact thing, the way you sit with something that isn't working yet and wait for it." Emery was looking at her hands on the keys. She said waiting was a skill, she said. Like anything else. She said most people think waiting is doing nothing, but really, it's doing something very quiet. Billy thought about 25 years of forward motion, of never waiting, of mistaking movement for progress. "She was right," he said. Emery played the phrase again. This time it came right. In November, Marcus finished the legal structure for the Rose DeWitt Music Foundation. Billy had sketched the idea the week after the performance, not in a grand gesture, not in the overcompensating way of a guilty man trying to buy peace, but in the quiet way of someone who has thought carefully about what would actually be useful. The foundation would fund music education in under-resourced schools on the south side of Chicago, instrument access, qualified teachers after-school programs. It would be named for Rose DeWitt with her photograph on the website, and her story told plainly, a woman on Calumet Avenue who had a piano and opened her door and gave 3 years of Tuesday and Thursday afternoons to a boy who showed up not knowing what he needed. Earl had read the founding documents carefully. He had asked 2 questions, both precise, both about accountability structures, nothing about sentiment, and then signed the family authorization allowing Rose's name to be used. He had not cried. He had folded the papers neatly and handed them back to Marcus and said, "She would have said it was too much." A pause. She would have been wrong. The foundation launched quietly in December. No press release, no announcement. A website, a donation page, a list of the first 6 schools that would receive funding in January. Billy had instructed the communications team no interview requests, no features, no profile pieces about the billionaire and the little girl and the piano lesson. If the story came out eventually, fine. But it was not a story he was telling about himself. It was a story Rose had already told. He was just the footnote. December brought early cold. Emery's table had moved inside the building management after a conversation Billy did not have directly, but that Earl mentioned had been initiated by someone had given her a small space in the lobby near the south entrance, a little folding table on Tuesday and Thursday mornings before she came upstairs for her lesson. Frank, the security guard, kept an eye on her. Raymond sometimes bought a bookmark when he arrived to pick up Billy. The bookmarks had gotten better. More confident color, more intricate patterns, the ribbon work more precise. She had started signing them on the back E. DeWitt in small, careful letters after Billy mentioned offhandedly that artists sign their work. She had looked at him when he said that. "I'm not an artist," she said. "Not yet," he said. "But you will be. Sign them anyway. Get in the habit." She had signed them ever since. On the last Tuesday of January, 6 months after Emery had first stood on the sidewalk with a folded piece of paper in both hands, Billy came downstairs at 6:15 and found her at her table. She was wearing a new coat, not lavender, deep green, properly fitted warm. She was straightening her bookmarks with the familiar two-fingered precision, and she looked up when he came through the doors with the same steady dark eyes she had always had. "New coat," he said. "Dad got it," she said. "Early birthday present. It suits you." She looked down at it briefly, the mild, pleased expression of someone who agrees, but is not going to make a production of agreeing. "I know," she said. He bought a bookmark. Yellow watercolor, this time blue ribbon. $2 from his wallet, singles the way he always paid. She gave him the bookmark and said, "Thank you, sir," the way she always did, and turned back to her display. He was almost at the door. "Mr. Tucker," she said. He turned. She was looking at him with an expression he had not seen on her before. Not the steady assessment of their early meetings, not the careful listening of the lessons, not the contained fullness of the day he played for her. Something quieter than all of those. Something that had settled. "I told Grandma Rose about the lessons," she said. "At her grave, last Sunday." Billy stood very still. "I told her you're a good teacher," she said. Patient. She would have said that was new. The corner of her mouth moved the small private expression she had when something was funny in a way she was choosing not to fully show. "But I told her it's true." He stood in the lobby of his own building in the early morning quiet and felt something he could not have named precisely. Not happiness, exactly. Not relief, exactly. Not grief, exactly. All three moving together the way the third section of the piece moved grief and relief in the same key, neither canceling the other out. "What did she say?" he asked. He meant it gently. He was not asking her to pretend just to tell him what she felt when she spoke to the grave. Emery thought about it. "Nothing," she said. But it was the good kind of nothing. Like when you finish a piece and the room is quiet and you know it landed right. Billy looked at her. 8 years old, in a green coat that fit properly, selling handmade bookmarks in the lobby of Tucker Corp. At 6:15 in the morning before piano lessons on Tuesday and Thursday, with her grandmother's patience and her grandmother's eyes, and her grandmother's particular way of saying the true thing without decoration. She said you'd know the song. He had known it. All along, buried under 25 years of forward motion, he had known it. He had just needed Rose to send someone to remind him. "Go straight," he said. "When you're done here, don't be late for school." "I'm never late," she said, with the mild indignation of someone whose record speaks for itself. He smiled, full unhurried, the kind of smile that had not come easily to him for years, and was coming more easily now. He went through the glass doors. 6 months later, the first cohort of students entered the Rose DeWitt Music Foundation's after-school program at a school on Calumet Avenue, Southside Chicago. 14 children, ages 8 to 12. A donated upright piano, black, in a room that had been a storage closet and was now painted yellow, and had music posters on the walls and good light from a window that the custodian had unboarded because someone finally asked him to. The teacher was a young woman named Diane, 26, who had grown up 4 blocks from Calumet Avenue and had learned piano at a community center that no longer existed, and had spent 3 years teaching private lessons while waiting for something like this to exist. On the first day, she told the students the foundation was named for a woman who had lived on this street, who had opened her door to a boy who heard music through the wall, who had given 3 years of Tuesday and Thursday afternoons without asking anything back except the thing she always asked, which was slow down. Feel it before you play it. One of the students, a girl 8 years old, small, with the particular stillness of a child who notices everything, raised her hand. "Did the boy become something?" she asked. Diane smiled. "Yes," she said. "He became something. And then a long time later he remembered where he started." The girl nodded, satisfied, and looked at the piano. In Manhattan, on a Tuesday afternoon in June, Emery DeWitt sat at a Steinway Model B on the 47th floor and played a simple melody with both hands, right hand carrying the tune, left hand, finding the harmony underneath the two working together the way they had been learning to work together for 8 months. She played it through once, then again steadier. Billy sat beside her on the bench, moved to the right the way he always did, making room, and listened. The piece was not Rose's song. It was not for Miss Rose. It was something Emery had started writing herself 3 weeks ago in pencil on manuscript paper Billy had given her in the careful, deliberate way she did everything. 8 bars. Simple, unhurried, the melody asking rather than demanding. No title yet. At the dining table, Earl sat with his paperback and did not watch. Through the north-facing window, the city was going gold with afternoon light. Manhattan in June doing what Manhattan in June does. Noisy, beautiful, indifferent to everything that isn't itself. In here music. Emery finished the 8 bars. Took her hands off the keys. Sat with the quiet the way Billy had taught her, let the room hold it for a moment before moving on. Then she looked at him. "What does it need?" she asked. Billy listened to where the piece had left the air. "It needs one more thing," he said. "One more phrase. Something that answers what you asked." She looked at the keys. "I don't know what that is yet," she said. "I know," he said. "You'll find it." He paused. "Take your time. It'll come when you're ready." She looked at him briefly, the quick dark gaze, the slight tilt of the head. "That's what Grandma Rose used to say," she said. "I know," he said. "She told me first." Emery turned back to the piano. She placed her hands on the keys. She began to play. Some debts cannot be paid in money. Some promises cannot be kept on time. But there is a grace not cheap, not easy, not without cost in the turning around. In the decision to face what you left behind and give it what it was always asking for, not your resources, not your success, not the impressive thing you built with the years between. Yourself. If you have been carrying something unfinished, a promise, a person, a part of yourself you left behind in a place you were too busy to return to, let this be the quiet that asks you, is it too late? Maybe. Probably. But Rose DeWitt kept a manuscript in her Bible for 25 years because she understood what most of us forget: late is not the same as never. And never is the only real waste. The song was always there, it was always known. It just needed someone patient enough to wait, and someone finally willing to sit down and play. If this story moved something in you, leave a comment below. Tell us what you've been meaning to go back to. And if you haven't subscribed yet, join us. We tell stories here about the things that matter, the quiet ones, the ones that don't make the news but change a life.